I never thought money could divide a family. But it did, and it started with a smile that wasn't really a smile. When my son, Daniel, brought home his new wife, Chloe, I was genuinely happy. She was beautiful, charming, and carried herself like someone who'd seen the world. At least, that's what I thought. But from the first day she stepped into our home, I sensed something. A quiet judgment in her eyes. The way she looked around my small living room, as if it wasn't good enough. I ignored it, because I believed love could soften anyone's heart. And Daniel loved her deeply. Still, I remember her first words to me after dinner that night. She smiled and said, "This place is cozy." But the pause before cozy was long enough to hurt. It was the kind of word people use when they mean small or cheap, but they don't want to say it out loud. I just nodded. Yes, it's not much, but it's home. She laughed lightly. Oh, I get it. Simplicity is refreshing. There it was again, that undertone, that delicate slice of insult wrapped in politeness. I decided not to respond. Some battles aren't worth fighting, especially with new family. But over the next few weeks, those tiny comments became sharper, each one cutting a little deeper. The day it really began was Daniel's birthday dinner. I had prepared his favorite, roasted chicken with garlic butter and mashed potatoes. Nothing fancy, but made with love. Chloe looked at the table, her eyes scanning the dishes. Then she whispered, but loud enough for me to hear, "I guess home-cooked meals are rustic." Daniel laughed it off, but I saw her smirk. That smirk stayed with me all night. After dinner, she showed everyone pictures from her parents' house. A mansion, a pool, imported marble floors. "Oh, my mom just redid the kitchen," she said. "Cost her nearly $100,000, but you know she likes things nice." Everyone complimented the pictures. Then she turned to me, smiling. "Maybe we can help you remodel this place one day, Mom. You know, give it an upgrade." I froze, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. There was pity in her tone, like she saw me as a charity case. I smiled softly and said, "That's very thoughtful, dear, but I like it the way it is." Inside, I felt something sink, a mix of sadness and quiet anger. But I stayed silent because I wasn't raised to fight pride with pride. Weeks turned into months. Every visit brought new remarks. Chloe would wear expensive perfume that lingered in my modest kitchen. She'd compare brands, talk about vacations, and subtly remind me of everything I didn't have. One afternoon, while Daniel was in the garage fixing something, she walked into the living room where I was knitting. She looked around and sighed. "You know, Mom, sometimes I wonder how Daniel grew up here. He's used to finer things now. I just don't want him to forget what he deserves." I paused. "And what is that, Chloe?" She smiled sweetly. "A life that matches his success. No offense, of course." I put down my yarn. None taken. No. I felt it. Every word. She called me poor without saying the word, but I heard it. I felt it echo in my chest. That night, I sat in bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the years I'd worked 2 jobs, just to make sure Daniel had everything he needed. School trips, tuition, a car when he turned 18. I never took vacations, never bought anything for myself. And now, the woman he loved looked at me as if I were beneath her. It broke something inside me, but not in the way she thought. See, there's a kind of strength that comes from being underestimated. When people think you're nothing, they forget to watch what you're capable of. And I had spent years being careful, saving every penny I could, investing quietly, living simply, not because I was poor, but because I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Still, her words, they lingered. The next time they visited, she brought her parents along. They arrived in a luxury car, dressed like they were going to a gala instead of lunch. Her mother looked around and gave me the same look Chloe did that first night, that polite, judgmental scan. "Oh, this is quaint," she said. "You must love the simplicity." I just smiled. "It keeps me grounded." Chloe's father chuckled. "Not everyone needs a mansion to be happy, right?" His tone was harmless, but his eyes weren't. They were mocking. And once again, Daniel didn't notice. He was too in love, too proud of his wife. I didn't blame him. Love makes you blind, sometimes to the very people who look down on your own blood. After lunch, Chloe's parents offered to help me upgrade the house. They said they could loan me money for renovations. I declined politely, but inside, something shifted. I was tired of being the silent one, tired of swallowing pride just to keep peace, tired of pretending I didn't notice the condescension. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them with anger. I was going to let the truth speak for itself. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A few weeks later, Chloe invited me to a family gathering at her parents' estate. It was an engagement party for her cousin, all luxury and show. I almost didn't go, but something inside told me this was my moment. When I arrived, I could feel eyes on me. My simple dress, my plain shoes. I stood out in a sea of designer gowns and polished heels. Chloe greeted me with that same sweet smile. "Mom, you made it. I was worried you might feel out of place." Her words were honey-coated venom. And for a second, I almost walked away. But I stayed, because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. I knew something she didn't, something no one there could imagine. And when the right moment came, I would show them exactly who they'd been underestimating. She laughed with her friends across the room, bragging about their new house, their car, their investments. And every time she looked at me, she smiled, that same pitying, superior smile. Little did she know, her world was about to change. Because I had brought something with me that night, something that would turn her smug confidence into shock, and her laughter into silence. But that moment was still to come. The air at Chloe's parents' mansion was thick with perfume and pride. Everywhere I looked, looked, people were dressed in glitter and gold, laughing loudly, flaunting success like it was part of the dress code. I stood near the edge of the room, clutching my small purse. Inside it was a single envelope, plain, white and quiet. But inside that envelope was something louder than all their arrogance combined. My bank statement. Not because I wanted to show off, but because sometimes the truth deserves to speak, especially when lies have gone too far. I watched Daniel mingling with Chloe's relatives, smiling, drinking, completely at ease. He belonged here, at least on the surface, and that made me proud even through the ache. Chloe floated around the room like a queen. Her voice carried easily, sharp and bright. Every few minutes, I'd hear her mention my husband's humble beginnings, or how he's worked so hard to rise above. Those words hit like invisible stones, each one carefully crafted to sound admiring, but dripping with hidden meaning. Rise above me. Dinner was served in a massive hall, the kind you see in magazines. Crystal chandeliers, long white tablecloths, and a dozen servants pouring wine like it was water. I sat quietly at the end of the table, between two distant cousins who barely acknowledged me. It didn't bother me. I was used to being overlooked. Sometimes that's where the strongest people sit, in silence, watching everything. Halfway through dinner, Chloe raised her glass. I just want to thank everyone for being here, she said, her tone sugary sweet. It means so much to celebrate with family, especially now that Daniel and I are planning our future. Everyone clapped politely. Then she added, and I have to thank my parents for showing me what success looks like. I hope one day we can reach even half their level. Her mother smiled proudly. Then Chloe looked down the table, straight at me. And of course, thank you, Mom, she said with a tight smile, for teaching Daniel where he came from. Humble beginnings make us appreciate comfort more, right? Laughter rippled across the table. Polite, shallow laughter. But I heard the real message underneath. I wasn't family. I was contrast, a background for her brightness. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled back, calm and unreadable. Yes, dear, I said softly. Humble beginnings make grateful hearts. Her smirk faltered, just slightly. Later that night, when dessert was served, I noticed her showing off again. She had her phone out, flipping through photos, vacations, cars, luxury brands. Daniel was beside her, smiling politely, trying to keep up with her energy. Then one of Chloe's aunts leaned toward me. So, how do you like their new place, Mrs. Thompson? Quite a step up, isn't it? I smiled gently. It's beautiful. I'm happy my son is happy. Oh, you're too kind, she said. Chloe has really elevated him. She's from a different world, you know. Different world. That phrase had teeth. I sipped my water and stayed quiet, because I'd already decided I wasn't going to defend myself tonight. I was going to reveal myself, and when I did, I wanted it to sting. The opportunity came when Chloe's father stood up to give a toast. He raised his glass and said, to family, prosperity, and good fortune. And to Daniel and Chloe, may your future be as bright as your ambitions. Applause filled the hall. Everyone raised their glasses. Then, just as people started sitting down again, Chloe's mother laughed and said, and let's not forget to thank our dear-in-law here. She raised Daniel well, even if she didn't have much to work with. The room chuckled. I froze. Daniel looked embarrassed, but didn't speak. He probably thought it was a harmless joke, but I could feel every eye on me, waiting to see how the poor mother-in-law would react. I set my glass down slowly. My heart was calm. My hands were steady, and that's when I took out the envelope. The table quieted. All those polished faces turned toward me. I'd like to say something, I began softly. Since we're talking about family and fortune. Chloe blinked. Oh, Mom, you don't have to. I raised a hand gently. I know, dear, but I want to. I stood up, holding the envelope. This isn't a brag, I said. I've never been one for showing off, but sometimes silence is mistaken for weakness, and humility for poverty. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Her father leaned forward, curious. This, I said, sliding the envelope across the table, is a copy of my financial statement. It's not something I normally share, but since there's been so much talk about who has what, I smiled softly. Maybe we can let numbers speak. Chloe's mother looked confused. Her father hesitated, then opened it. The room went silent, completely silent. His eyes widened. He glanced at me, then back at the paper. Chloe leaned over, curious, then froze. Her face drained of color, because in that moment, every assumption she'd made about me, every cruel little word she'd whispered evaporated. The balance stared back at her. More zeros than she'd ever imagined. Savings, investments, properties, all neatly detailed. I didn't need to explain how. I didn't need to justify anything. I simply said, I may not live like I'm rich, but that doesn't mean I'm poor. The entire table went still. No one spoke. Even the laughter from other rooms seemed to fade. Then I added quietly, I learned long ago that real wealth doesn't need an audience. It just needs peace. Chloe's father cleared his throat. I didn't realize. I smiled. You weren't supposed to. Then I turned to Chloe. She couldn't meet my eyes. I leaned slightly forward and said, respect isn't earned by money, dear. It's earned by character. Something no bank can measure. Her face flushed red. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. And for the first time since I'd met her, she looked small. Not because I had shamed her, but because she had finally seen the truth. The rest of the dinner was awkwardly quiet. No one dared to speak of wealth again. Chloe's mother avoided my gaze, and her father was suddenly very polite. I didn't stay much longer. I said my goodbyes calmly, hugged Daniel, and left with my head held high. The night air outside felt cool and clean, like the weight weight of months had lifted off my chest. I didn't need applause. I didn't need them to like me. All I wanted was for them to understand. And they did. But as I walked toward my car, I noticed Chloe standing by the door, tears in her eyes, hands shaking. "Mom," she whispered, "why didn't you ever tell us?" I looked at her gently. "Because," I said, "if you only respect people for their money, you never really respect them at all." She nodded slowly, speechless, and I left her standing there, caught between guilt and realization. But I had a feeling this wasn't the end of it, because shame changes people, sometimes for the better, sometimes not, and I could tell Chloe wasn't done learning her lesson yet. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The night's events replayed in my mind like a quiet storm. The laughter, the stares, the silence that followed when I laid the truth bare. For months, I'd swallowed pride to keep peace, but last night, peace finally found me. Still, I didn't feel victorious. No, it wasn't joy that filled me, it was calm. A deep, still calm that comes when truth finally sits on the table where lies once dined. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The sun had just begun to rise, coloring the sky with soft orange light. For the first time in months, I felt light, but I knew Chloe, and I knew that silence wasn't her style. She was pride wrapped in perfume, sweet but strong enough to choke, and I could already sense it. This wasn't over. Around 9, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "Hey, Mom," he said, his tone uncertain. "Can we come over? Chloe wants to talk." I took a sip of my tea and smiled faintly. "Of course. I'll make breakfast." 2 hours later, their car pulled up. Chloe stepped out, dressed in her usual perfection, hair neat, makeup flawless, but her eyes tired. Daniel looked nervous. He kissed my cheek and mumbled, "Please don't be upset. She just wants to clear things up." I nodded. "I'm not upset, sweetheart." But Chloe's silence as she entered the house spoke louder than any apology. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table she once called quaint. She stared at the mug of coffee I'd set before her. Finally, she exhaled. "Mrs. Thompson," she began, her voice low, "I owe you an apology." Her tone was rehearsed, careful, but at least she was trying. I nodded slightly. "Go on." She looked at Daniel, then back at me. "I didn't mean to embarrass you last night. I was just surprised. I didn't know you were that." She paused, searching for the right word. "That's successful." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean rich?" She bit her lip. "I didn't want to say it like that, but that's what you meant," I said quietly. "You judged me because you thought I didn't have money. And now that you know I do, suddenly I deserve your respect." Her eyes darted down. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Mom," he began, but I held up my hand. "This isn't about money, Daniel. It's about kindness and humility." I looked back at Chloe. "Tell me something, dear. If that envelope had shown I was broke, would you still be here apologizing?" Her silence said everything. I sighed softly. "Chloe, I don't need your apology. What I wanted last night wasn't revenge. It was clarity. For you and for everyone else." She looked out confused. "Clarity, yes. Because I wanted you to understand that respect isn't a favor you give to the wealthy. It's something you show to every human being, rich or poor." She blinked, her expression softening, but her pride still lingered beneath the surface. I continued, "Money can buy many things, but it can't buy grace. And I'm afraid that's what you've been lacking." Her lips parted slightly, as if to defend herself, but she stayed silent. Maybe for the first time, she was actually listening. After a long pause, Daniel spoke. "Mom, I'm sorry I didn't say anything last night. I just didn't know what to do." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. You're a good son, Daniel. You've always been respectful, even when others weren't." He looked relieved, but guilty. I could see it in his eyes. He loved Chloe, but he knew she had crossed a line. And now, the question hung in the air, could she ever change? A few days passed before I heard from them again. Daniel called often, checking in, but Chloe stayed quiet. I didn't expect much. People like her, raised on wealth and status, often struggle to look beyond appearances. Still, something told me she wasn't done processing what happened. Then one afternoon, as I was watering my plants, I heard a car door outside. It was Chloe, alone this time. She walked up the porch steps, holding a small basket of flowers. Her face looked softer, different. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. "Can I come in?" I nodded. "Of course." She stepped inside, her hands trembling slightly. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about character and respect. And you're right. I was awful to you." Her voice cracked. "I grew up thinking money meant worth. My parents, they measure everything in dollars and status. And I just..." She looked down, ashamed. "I became them." I stayed silent. Sometimes, silence helps people hear themselves better. She wiped her tears. "I thought I was helping Daniel fit in. But all I did was push you away. The very person who raised the man I love." Her words hit deep, because for the first time, I heard sincerity. I placed a hand on hers. "Chloe, the fact that you can admit that, it means you're already changing. But remember, respect isn't a speech. It's a habit." She nodded slowly. "I know. I'm trying." I smiled softly. "That's all I asked." We sat there for a few moments in silence. And for once, it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Before she left, she looked around my house again, the same way she had months ago. Only this time, there was no judgment in her eyes. "It's beautiful here," she said. "Warm. It feels real." I chuckled. "It's not marble floors and chandeliers, but it holds a lot of love." She smiled faintly. "I can feel that now." When she hugged me before leaving, it wasn't forced. It was gentle, human. And as her car disappeared down the road, I whispered to myself, maybe she finally finally understands. But deep down, a part of me still wondered, was it guilt driving her change or something else? Because guilt fades, and pride hides. It waits for the right moment to show itself again. And I had a feeling the story wasn't over yet. For a while, everything seemed peaceful. Chloe visited more often. She helped around the house, smiled easily, and even brought over little gifts, candles, flowers, pastries. It was nice. Too nice almost. At first, I wanted to believe she had changed. That maybe, after everything, she'd learned humility. But I'd lived long enough to know people don't change overnight. Sometimes, guilt wears a mask called kindness, and underneath, pride still breathes. One Sunday afternoon, Daniel and Chloe invited me to lunch at their new home. I hadn't seen it yet. They bought a big house outside the city, modern, spacious, all glass and light. When I arrived, Daniel was in the yard, grilling. Chloe greeted me with open arms. "Mom, you made it. Come in. I can't wait to show you everything." Her enthusiasm was genuine. At least, it sounded that way. The house was beautiful, cold, but beautiful. White marble floors, huge windows, furniture that looked more like decoration than comfort. She showed me the kitchen. "All custom made," she said proudly. "Imported from Italy. Took months to design." I smiled politely. "It's lovely." She grinned. "Oh, and wait till you see the walk-in closet. Daniel says it's bigger than our first apartment." Her laugh was light, but her eyes flit toward me like she wanted to see if I was impressed. I wasn't. I'd seen wealth before, real wealth. The kind that doesn't need to shout. Still, I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the best mirror. It shows people who they really are. Lunch was nice at first. We sat outside under the pergola, the sunlight soft through the leaves. Daniel talked about work. Chloe talked about redecorating. And for a while, it felt normal. Until she said it. "You know, Mom," she began, cutting her steak neatly. "Daniel and I have been thinking, maybe we should help you modernize your home. You know, make it more presentable." I looked up, my forepaws midair. "Presentable?" She smiled sweetly. "Oh, don't take it the wrong way. I just mean, we could add some upgrades. Maybe change the flooring, redo the kitchen. You've done so much for us. Let us do something for you." Her tone was honeyed, but the words tasted familiar. Almost identical to the ones she'd said months ago. And there it was again, that quiet arrogance creeping through her charm. I set my fork down gently. "Chloe, my home doesn't need to be modern. It needs to be mine." She blinked. "Of course. I didn't mean to offend." "But you did," I said softly. "Because every time you talk about my house, you talk as if it's something broken that needs fixing. But it's not broken. It's just different." Her smile faltered. Daniel looked between us, unsure what to say. I leaned back, calm but firm. Kindness isn't about giving someone what you think they need. It's about understanding what truly makes them happy. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then Chloe nodded slowly. "You're right, Mom. I guess I still have a lot to learn." Her voice was gentle, but I saw something flicker behind her eyes. A flash of pride, a hint of defiance. It wasn't over. Not yet. A week later, Daniel called. "Mom, would you mind watching the house for a few days? Chloe and I are going on a short trip." "Of course," I said. "Where are you headed?" "Lake Tahoe. Just need a break. Go enjoy yourselves." I told him, "I'll take care of everything." When I arrived at their home, Chloe had left a long list of instructions. The thermostat, the alarm code, even how to water the plants. She'd written it all down in perfect handwriting, ending with a note. "Thank you, Mom. You're the best. Please don't touch the closet. Everything's organized perfectly." "Chloe," I smiled. "The closet." Of course. She'd always been proud of that closet. And part of me, a small, curious part, wondered why she'd even mention it. So I didn't go near it. Not because I was afraid, but because respect means keeping boundaries, even when others forget yours. 2 days passed quietly. I cooked, watered her plants, watched old shows on TV. On the third night, while closing the windows, I noticed a sound coming from upstairs. A faint humming, like machinery. I followed it to the walk-in closet. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, a row of lights lined the ceiling, illuminating rows upon rows of designer shoes, handbags, and dresses, tags still hanging. It looked more like a boutique than a personal wardrobe. I stood there, stunned. Dozens of luxury items, stacked and arranged, many unopened. And right there, in the center of it all, was a small safe, the source of the humming. It was open. Curiosity got the better of me. Inside were documents, bills, receipts, and several credit card statements. I didn't mean to pry, but when one page caught my eye, I froze. It wasn't just spending, it was debt. Hundreds of thousands. Chloe had been living a lie. Not wealth, but illusion. I closed the safe quietly and stepped back. It all made sense now. The obsession with appearances, the gifts, the perfection, the pride. She was drowning and painting over the water to hide it. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt pity, because I'd seen what pride could do. It eats people from the inside out. And Chloe, she was already fading. When they returned from their trip, I said nothing. I simply handed back the house keys and smiled. "Everything was fine," I said softly. "I left things just as they were." She smiled nervously. "Thank you, Mom." But as she looked at me, I saw the flicker in her eyes, that fear. She knew I'd seen something, and she knew I wasn't going to tell Daniel. Not yet, because some truths need to wait. That night, I sat at home, staring out the window, thinking, sometimes silence isn't protection. Sometimes it's mercy. But mercy has limits. And when those limits are crossed, even the quietest person can roar. And I had a feeling that moment was coming soon. It took only a few days before I started noticing changes in Chloe. She was quieter, quieter, distracted. Her confidence, that bright, showy light, had started to flicker. Daniel didn't notice it at first. He was too busy with work, too trusting of her perfect smiles. But I could see the cracks, and when pride begins to crack, truth always leaks through. One evening, Daniel came over after work. He looked tired, shoulders slumped. "Mom," he sighed, "I think Chloe's been stressed lately. She's been on edge, snapping over little things." I poured him tea. "Have you asked her why?" He shook his head. "She just says she's overwhelmed with the house, the bills, managing everything." "But Mom," he paused, "she insists everything's fine. Yet last week, I got a call from the bank. They said one of our cards had maxed out. I didn't even know we had more than one." I looked at him quietly. He didn't know the half of it. My instinct told me not to interfere. Not yet. Because sometimes people only learn when they're forced to face their own mess. But my heart ached for him. He was my son, and he was walking blind into a storm. A week later, Chloe called me. Her voice trembled slightly. "Mom, could you come over? I need to talk." When I arrived, she looked pale. Mascara smudged, hands shaking. "Is Daniel home?" I asked. She shook her head. "He's at work." We sat at the kitchen counter, the same pristine space she once bragged about. Now, it felt like a stage for confession. "I know you saw the closet," she said quietly. "And the safe." I didn't answer. She took a deep breath. "You must think I'm pathetic." I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face, once confident and sharp, now carried something soft or fragile. "No," I said gently. "I think you're human." She let out a weak laugh. "Human, right. You know, I've spent my whole life pretending to have more, to be more. My parents drilled it into me. Appearance is everything. But the truth is, I'm drowning." Her voice cracked. "I maxed out cards trying to keep up. The clothes, the furniture, the parties, all of it. I thought if everything looked perfect, my life would feel perfect." She buried her face in her hands. "But it doesn't. It just feels empty." I let the silence settle for a moment. Then I said softly, "Chloe, lies built on pride always collapse, sooner or later." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to drag Daniel into it," she whispered. "I just didn't want him, or you, to think I wasn't good enough." I sighed, my heart heavy. "You don't prove worth with things, Chloe. You prove it with honesty, with how you love and how you live." She looked up, desperate. "But how do I fix this? The debt, the guilt, everything feels too big." I leaned forward. "You start by telling the truth." Her lips trembled. "To Daniel, yes, before someone else does." Her face went pale. She knew I was right, and deep down, she feared the one thing pride can't bear, exposure. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about my son, about his faith in the woman he loved, and I thought about Chloe carrying a secret that could ruin them both. In the quiet of the night, I made a decision. If she didn't tell him, I would. Because protecting someone doesn't always mean keeping their secrets. Sometimes, it means breaking their silence. 2 days passed. Then Daniel showed up at my door again, unannounced. His face said everything before his words did. "Mom," he said, voice low. I found out. I stayed silent. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "She took out loans, cards I didn't even know existed. We're in debt, deep debt, and she lied about it for months." His voice cracked. "How could she do this?" I reached out and held his arm. "Because she was afraid. Not of you, Daniel, but of losing what she thought made her valuable." He looked at me, broken. "She said she wanted to protect me, but all she did was betray me." I nodded slowly. "Pride can't protect love, son. It only poisons it." He sat down, burying his face in his hands. "I don't know what to do, Mom. I love her, but I can't trust her." I took a deep breath. "Then make her earn it back, not with apologies, but with actions. You both made vows, but forgiveness isn't free, Daniel. It's earned through truth." He nodded slowly. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "She told me you knew, that you found out before I did." I looked him in the eye. "I did." He frowned. "Why didn't you tell me?" I sighed softly. "Because I wanted her to. I gave her a chance to be brave." His shoulders slumped. "And she wasn't." "No," I said gently, "but maybe this is her moment to learn courage." That evening, he went home to talk to her. I waited by the window for hours, watching the streetlights flicker against the dark sky. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. We talked. She told me everything. "It's going to take time, but I think she means it. Thank you for not giving up on her." I smiled, tears welling in my eyes. Because maybe, just maybe, the lesson had finally landed. Weeks passed. They started cutting expenses, selling off luxuries, living simply. And for the first time, Chloe looked real. She began volunteering at a local shelter, teaching young women about financial awareness. She told me one day, "If I can stop even one girl from chasing emptiness like I did, maybe I can make peace with my mistakes." I hugged her, because that was the first thing she'd ever said that came from her heart, not her pride. But even as I watched her rebuild, I knew something else. Sometimes, change is fragile, and when the world tests you again, you either stand firm or fall back into the same pit. And life was about to test her again. Because one phone call would shake everything all over. It happened on a quiet Thursday afternoon. The sky was gray, the kind of color that makes you feel like something's coming, something heavy. I was baking that day, humming to myself when the phone rang. It was Daniel, but his voice, it wasn't his usual calm. It trembled. "Mom," he said, "it's Chloe. She's in trouble." My heart stopped mid-beat. "What happened?" He took a shaky breath. "It's not an accident or anything. It's worse." By the time I got to their house, Daniel was pacing in the living room. His hair was messy, his eyes red. Chloe sat on the couch, pale, clutching a folded letter in her hand. hands. When she looked up, her eyes were full of panic. "Mom," she whispered, "I messed up again." The words hit me like ice. Daniel handed me the letter, a notice from the IRS. Back taxes, unreported income, tens of thousands owed. I stared at the paper, my throat tightening. "Chloe, what is this?" She started crying. "It's my business, the online store. I tried to start something small last year. I thought I could handle it myself, but I didn't file things right. I ignored the letters, and now they're saying I owe everything back." Daniel clenched his fists. "You didn't tell me." Again, she sobbed harder. "I didn't want to ruin things. I thought I could fix it before you found out." I sat down across from her. The same woman who once mocked me for being simple, now trembling, drowning in her own complications. "Chloe," I said softly, "you can't keep hiding from your mistakes. Secrets don't disappear. They multiply." She wiped her tears. "I know. I don't know where to start." Daniel stood near the window, staring out. "I can't do this anymore, Mom," he said quietly. "Every time I think we're okay, something else comes out." His voice broke. "I feel like I don't even know who she is." Chloe turned toward him, desperate. "Please, Daniel, I'm not lying to you now. I swear, I'll fix this. I'll sell whatever I have to." But her words sounded empty, because when trust is broken too many times, apologies start to echo. I took a deep breath. "Daniel," I said, "why don't you go for a drive? Clear your head. Let me talk to her alone." He hesitated. Then he nodded and left without another word. The silence that followed was heavy. Chloe sat, trembling, eyes red and raw. "I've ruined everything," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, you've just been given another lesson, a harsher one." She frowned weakly. "A lesson?" "Yes," I said. "You've spent your whole life building a castle out of glass. Beautiful, but fragile. Every lie, every secret, it cracked the walls. And now it's all falling apart. But maybe that's what needed to happen." She looked down, whispering, "Why do I keep doing this?" "Because," I said, leaning closer, "you were taught to fear judgment more than failure. You were raised to impress, not to be honest." Her lip quivered. "I don't even know who I am without pretending." "Then it's time to find out," I said gently. "And that starts with facing what you've done, no matter how ugly it is." For a while, neither of us spoke, just the sound of the clock ticking. Then she asked, "Do you think Daniel will ever forgive me?" I sighed. "That depends on whether you forgive yourself first. Because right now, you're still punishing yourself and him for trying to be perfect." Her tears came again, softer this time, like the beginning of surrender. That night, I stayed with her. We went through the paperwork together. Receipts, invoices, statements, everything she'd been avoiding for months. It was a mess, but messes can be cleaned if you stop pretending they're not there. By midnight, Chloe was exhausted. Her mascara had faded. Her voice was hoarse, but her face looked different. Not polished, not perfect, but real. And for the first time, I saw the woman she could have been all along. The next morning, Daniel came home. He looked drained, but calm. When he saw the papers spread out on the table, his eyes softened just a little. "You started sorting it out?" he asked quietly. Chloe nodded. "Yes, Mom helped me. I'm going to call an accountant tomorrow. I'll pay back every cent." Daniel didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I want to believe you, Chloe. I really do," she whispered. "Then let me prove it." He nodded slowly. "This is your last chance." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was hope. And sometimes that's enough to start again. In the days that followed, Chloe worked tirelessly. She sold handbags, jewelry, even furniture. Everything she'd once used to show off, now sacrificed to rebuild. Daniel helped where he could, and I watched quietly from the sidelines, proud but cautious, because I knew something most people forget. The hardest part of change isn't starting over. It's staying humble when the pride tries to crawl back. And Chloe, she was still at war with hers. One night, she came over for dinner. She was quieter than usual, thoughtful. "Mom," she said, "do you think people like me ever really change? Or do we just pretend to until the guilt fades?" I looked at her carefully. "Change doesn't mean becoming someone else, Chloe. It means becoming honest with who you already are." She nodded slowly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Then I guess I'm finally learning who that is." I smiled. "Good. Just don't forget, life has a way of testing lessons you don't finish." She laughed softly. "Then I better keep studying." I chuckled with her, but deep down I knew the truth. Life wasn't done with her, and the next test would be one she never saw coming. A few peaceful months passed. The chaos settled. The air around Daniel and Chloe's home felt lighter, less like a mansion and more like a home. Chloe had changed, or at least she was trying. She'd taken a part-time job at a local boutique, helping with finances, saving little by little to pay off what was left of the debt. She cooked at home more often, wore simpler clothes, even started volunteering at a women's center once a week. For the first time, I believed she might really be transforming. But change is fragile. And peace has a way of attracting tests. It started with a letter. I was at home when Daniel dropped by, holding a brown envelope in his hand. His face was tense. "Mom," he said quietly, "this came in the mail for Chloe, but I think you should see it too." He handed me the envelope. It was from a law firm. Inside was a notice, a legal claim from one of Chloe's former business partners. Apparently, the boutique she started before marrying Daniel wasn't as innocent as she told him. Unpaid taxes were one thing, but this was fraud. My chest tightened as I read. The letter claimed that Chloe had taken investment money, large sums, for a luxury brand she never launched. Her partner now wanted it all back. I looked up at Daniel. His jaw was tight, his hands trembling slightly. She told me it was just a side project, something that failed. I exhaled slowly, and now he looked at me. pain flickering behind his eyes. Now, I don't know what to believe anymore. That evening, he confronted her. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just asked calmly, "Is it true?" Chloe's face went pale. For a moment, she said nothing, and that silence was louder than any confession. Finally, she whispered, "Yes." Daniel's shoulders dropped. "How much?" She swallowed hard. 50,000, but I was going to pay it back. I swear I didn't mean for it to get as far. He stared at her, disbelief painted all over his face. "You didn't mean to? Chloe, you promised me. You promised no more secrets." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I thought I could fix it before it reached you. I didn't want to drag you into another mess." Daniel shook his head. "You keep saying that, but you keep dragging me anyway. I was there that night, standing by the doorway, hearing every word. Part of me wanted to step in, to calm things, to protect them both from themselves. But another part of me knew this was their fight to face. Chloe's past had finally come for her, and this time, no amount of charm or apology would sweep it away." Daniel walked out, slamming the door behind him. Chloe collapsed to the floor, sobbing. When I stepped inside, she didn't even look up. "Why do I keep ruining everything?" she cried. I knelt beside her. "Because you've been running from truth your whole life," I said gently. "And truth always catches up, no matter how fast you run." She shook her head. "I thought I could fix it, Mom. I really did, but I just keep failing." "Then maybe it's time to stop fixing and start facing," I said quietly. "Fixing means hiding cracks. Facing means rebuilding." Her sobs softened. "Do you think he'll ever forgive me?" I sighed. "Forgiveness isn't the issue anymore. It's trust. And once that's broken, rebuilding it takes more than words. It takes years." She nodded weakly. "I'll do whatever it takes." I believed her, but I also knew belief wasn't enough this time. The lawsuit hit quickly. The former partner demanded repayment within 60 days. If she failed, he'd file criminal charges. Chloe spent days making calls, meeting lawyers, crying herself to exhaustion. Daniel barely spoke to her. He stayed at a friend's place, needing space. It hurt me to see them like that. Two people who loved each other but couldn't find their way through the damage. And yet, beneath the pain, I saw something else in Chloe resolve. A fire I hadn't seen before. One evening, she came to my house. Her eyes were swollen, her hair messy, but her voice was steady. "Mom," she said, "I decided to sell the house." I froze. "What?" "I talked to Daniel's lawyer. It's under both our names, but if we sell, we can pay the debt and settle the case. Maybe start over somewhere smaller." Her eyes filled again, but she blinked the tears away. "I can't keep living in a house built on lies." I stared at her for a long moment, and for the first time, I didn't see pride. I saw strength. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded firmly. "Yes, I have to make it right." When Daniel heard, he was stunned. "She wants to sell the house." I nodded. "Yes, to pay the debt." "She's serious, Daniel." He fell silent, looking down at his hands. After a moment, he whispered, "Maybe she's finally telling the truth." I smiled faintly. Sometimes, the only way to prove honesty is through sacrifice. A month later, the house was sold. Chloe repaid every cent. No fancy lawyers, no excuses, just quiet accountability. And when the papers were signed, she handed Daniel the final check and said, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm not running anymore." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said softly, "Maybe that's the first thing you've done right." They moved into a small apartment downtown. Modest, simple, filled with light. No chandeliers, no marble floors, just peace. I visited them one weekend. Chloe cooked dinner, her hand steady, her smile real. When I looked at her across the table, I realized something. This was the woman she was meant to be all along, stripped of status, but full of substance. Still, as the evening ended, I couldn't shake a quiet thought. Sometimes, life gives you peace only to see how long you'll protect it. And deep down, I knew the world wasn't done testing her yet. Because true change only proves itself when temptation returns. And one day soon it would. For a while, peace finally felt real. Daniel and Chloe's new apartment was small but full of laughter. No designer furniture, no debt letters, no hidden secrets. Just quiet mornings, shared dinners, and the sound of healing. Chloe had started working at a local accounting firm. She was learning to manage small business finances, the very thing that once ruined her. Irony has a cruel way of becoming destiny. But for her, it was redemption. Or so I hoped. One Friday afternoon, I visited them for lunch. Chloe was cooking pasta, humming softly. Daniel looked relaxed for the first time in months. "Mom," he said with a smile, "I think we're finally getting the hang of normal life." I laughed softly. Normal is a blessing most people overlook. Chloe smiled, setting the table. "I've learned that the hard way." For the first time in a long time, I believed her. Her tone wasn't rehearsed. Her smile wasn't for show. It was simple, real. And yet somewhere deep in my gut, I felt that faint tug. That whisper that peace never lasts forever. A few weeks later, the whisper turned into reality. Chloe called me late one night. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "you won't believe this. My old friend Tara called. She's launching a startup and wants me to join as financial director. It's huge. Investors, offices, everything." Her voice was filled with a kind of excitement I hadn't heard since before the downfall. I hesitated. "And how do you feel about it?" She laughed. "Excited. Nervous, but excited." She said the salary's incredible, and there's even a bonus if things take off. It could change everything for us. I paused. "That sounds promising," I said carefully. "But Chloe, remember what excitement can do. It blinds you to red flags." She sighed, half amused. "I know, Mom, but I've learned my lesson. I promise I'll be careful this time. I smiled faintly, though unease prickled the back of my neck. I'd heard those exact words before. A month later, Chloe was fully immersed in the new company. Late nights, business dinners, frequent travel. Daniel was supportive at first, proud even. But soon, the distance crept in. He'd come over to my house looking weary. She's barely home anymore, Mom. Always on calls, talking about investors and deals. I'm happy for her, but I can feel her slipping away again. I sighed. Old habits die hard, Daniel. But maybe this time, she's really doing it for the right reasons. He nodded slowly, though I could see the doubt clouding his face. Weeks passed. The startup grew fast, too fast. Chloe started dressing up again, buying new things. Not luxury, but close enough to the edge that I noticed. Then one evening, she stopped by my house unannounced. Her smile was wide, but her eyes restless. Mom, she said, I have the most amazing news. Tara wants me to handle a new investor account, $1 million portfolio. Can you believe that? Me? I looked at her carefully. That's a big responsibility. She nodded quickly. Yes, but it's perfect. I've been so careful with everything. I just need to transfer some funds for Tara to finalize the deal tomorrow. Her money? I asked. Chloe hesitated. Technically, yes, but it's part of the investment pool. It's fine, Mom. I know what I'm doing. My heart sank because I'd heard that tone before. The confident, trembling tone of someone trying to convince themselves first. Chloe, I said gently, are you sure everything's legitimate? She smiled tightly. Of course. Tara's my friend. She'd never. Her voice trailed off as she caught my expression. Doubt flickered behind her eyes. The next few days were tense. Daniel mentioned that Chloe had been secretive again. She'd stopped sharing details about her work. And though she smiled, something in her eyes had changed. That same restless hunger I thought she buried. Then it happened. A call. Early one morning. Daniel's voice, sharp and panicked. Mom, they froze Chloe's account. Her company's under investigation. Fraud. Again. My knees went weak. What? The police came to the office, he said. Apparently, her boss, Tara, was running an investment scam. Millions gone. And Chloe, he choked on the words. They think she was involved. By the time I reached their apartment, chaos had unfolded. Chloe sat on the couch, shaking, her laptop open, emails flashing across the screen. Investigators, lawyers, reporters. She looked at me with wild, tear-filled eyes. I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know. Tara handled everything. I just moved the funds she approved. Daniel stood near the door, silent. He looked torn between disbelief and exhaustion. I knelt beside her. Chloe, listen to me. Tell the truth. All of it. Right now. She sobbed. They won't believe me. I already have a record of debt and bad credit. Who's going to believe I didn't do this? Then prove it, I said firmly. Find the emails, the transactions, every single thing that clears your name. Her tears fell harder. What if I can't? Then, I said softly, you face it. Not with fear this time, but with honesty. The investigation lasted weeks. Every day was torture for her. Interviews, calls, suspicion from everyone. I watched as she slowly unraveled, but I also saw something remarkable. She didn't run this time. She didn't hide. She faced every question, every accusation, every painful truth. And finally, the truth came out. Tara had forged documents. Chloe had unknowingly signed off on transfers she believed were legitimate. She was cleared of charges, but not without scars. When it was all over, she came to me, eyes swollen but calm. I'm free, she said quietly, but I feel like I've aged 10 years. I smiled sadly. Freedom always costs something, Chloe. For you, it cost illusion. She nodded. Maybe that's a good thing. I reached out and took her hand. It is, because now you finally know the difference between looking rich and living rich. She smiled faintly. And what's that difference? Peace, I said simply. Peace of heart, not of wallet. Her eyes filled again, but this time with gratitude. Thank you, Mom, for never giving up on me. I squeezed her hand. You made it hard sometimes. We both laughed, quietly, tiredly, honestly. But as she stood to leave, I saw something in her eyes. Not pride, not fear. Just peace. Real, hard-earned peace. Still, I knew life wasn't done with her story. Because even after redemption, the past never fully disappears. It lingers, waiting for the next chapter to be written. And deep down, I wondered what would happen when the next test came knocking. It had been almost a year since the investigation ended. Chloe had rebuilt her life from the ground up, slower this time, steadier. She and Daniel had found a rhythm again, one rooted not in luxury, but in quiet respect. I watched her grow into a woman who no longer needed validation. No more lavish dreams. No more false appearances. Just a simple desire, peace. For the first time, I believed she was truly free. Until life decided to test that freedom one last time. It started innocently enough. A reunion. Chloe's college friend group planned a weekend getaway. 3 days at a lakeside resort. Just some old friends catching up, she told me, smiling. Nothing fancy, I promise. I smiled back, though something inside me stirred. Old friends can bring back old habits and old temptations. Have fun, I told her. Just remember who you've become, not who you were. She laughed softly. I will, Mom. I promise. And she meant it. At least, I think she did. The first 2 days went well. She sent pictures, campfires, sunsets, laughter. Daniel looked happy, relaxed, texting me updates. But on the third night, my phone rang. It was Daniel, and the worry in his voice made my stomach twist. Mom, have you seen the posts? What posts? I asked. He hesitated. Chloe's friend, Miranda, she tagged her in photos. They're all over social media. I don't know what to think. blank. I opened my laptop, and there it was. A photo of Chloe, dressed in an expensive designer dress, champagne in hand, standing beside a luxury car. The caption read, "Back with my girls, celebrating success and style. Some habits never die, winking face." My heart dropped, not because of the picture itself, but because of what it represented. The old Chloe, the one who cared too much about appearances, the one who once believed luxury equaled worth. That night, Daniel came over, restless. "She swore she was done with that world," he said. "She told me she'd changed." I looked at him calmly. "Maybe she has. Or maybe she's just being tested." He frowned. "But what if this time she fails again?" I sighed softly. Then maybe she wasn't ready to pass the lesson. The next morning, Chloe came home early, earlier than expected. Her face was pale, her eyes tired. Before I could speak, she said quietly, "You saw the pictures, didn't you?" I nodded. She sighed, setting her bag down. "It wasn't what it looked like, Mom. The dress wasn't mine. Miranda insisted I wear it for one of her brand photos. She said it would bring the old sparkle back." I should have said no. I studied her face. No makeup, no mask. Just exhaustion and regret. "Why didn't you?" I asked gently. Her shoulders slumped. "Because for a moment it felt good. Being admired again. Being that version of me. But afterward, I hated it. I realized how fragile that high really is." She looked up at me, tears filling her eyes. "I don't want to go back there, Mom. Not ever." Later that day, Daniel came by. He was distant, his expression guarded. Chloe met his gaze. "I messed up," she said before he could speak. "Not with money, not with lies, just with myself." I let old pride whisper to me again. Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at her for a long time, then exhaled. "I don't care about the photo," he said quietly. "I just needed to know if you were still being honest with me." She nodded through her tears. "I am. I swear I am." He stepped forward, gently cupping her face. "Then that's all that matters." And just like that, forgiveness, quiet and simple, filled the room. Weeks passed, and the noise from the photos died down. Chloe stayed off social media. She focused on work, on rebuilding trust not through words, but through consistency. She began teaching financial literacy workshops for young women like her old self, chasing wealth instead of worth. One evening, she invited me to attend her first session. I sat in the back, watching as she stood before a small group, speaking with calm honesty. "I used to think money gave me power," she told them, "but it actually owned me. I hid behind it until I lost everything that really mattered. My integrity, my peace, my self-worth." Her voice shook, but she didn't hide it. "Now, I live with less, but I live with truth. And that's more wealth than I ever had before." The room went silent. Then the women applauded softly, some even crying. I felt tears in my eyes too, because that wasn't the Chloe who once mocked me. That was a woman reborn. Afterward, she came to sit beside me. Her smile was gentle, tired. "Did I do okay?" she asked. I squeezed her hand. "You did beautifully." She chuckled softly. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were ordinary, someone to look down on. But now I realize you were everything I wasn't. You were strong, quietly strong." I smiled. "Strength doesn't need noise, Chloe. It just needs truth." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I finally understand that." That night, as I drove home, I thought about how far we'd all come. The insults, the lies, the lessons. Every wound had shaped something better. Chloe had found redemption not in wealth, but in humility. Daniel had found peace not in pride, but in forgiveness. And me, I'd found a strange kind of joy in watching grace win over ego. But as I pulled into my driveway, I whispered a small prayer. Because even though the storm had passed, I knew life would always have another wave waiting. And all I could hope for was that when it came, she'd remember everything she'd learned. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I got the call. Not one of panic this time, but of peace. "Mom," Chloe said softly on the other end, "we're having a small family dinner tonight. Just you, Daniel, and a few close friends. Nothing fancy. I want to celebrate something." Her voice sounded calm, steady, the kind of tone that told me she found her balance again. I smiled. "What are we celebrating, dear?" She laughed lightly. "You'll see." When I arrived that evening, I almost didn't recognize their apartment. It was still modest, still simple, but warm in a way money could never buy. The scent of roasted herbs and candlelight filled the room. Laughter drifted from the kitchen. Chloe greeted me at the door, apron tied, hair slightly messy. Her face glowed, not from makeup or luxury, but from contentment. "Mom," she said with a wide smile, "dinner's almost ready. Come sit." Daniel appeared with a glass of lemonade, grinning. "Don't worry, Mom, I cooked too." She didn't burn anything this time. We laughed together, and that laughter, honest and unguarded, felt like healing itself. When we sat down to eat, Chloe placed something small on the table. An envelope. I frowned slightly. "What's this?" She smiled. "A thank you for everything." Inside was a note, handwritten, neat, with small smudges where tears had clearly fallen. "Dear Mom, I once judged you by what you didn't have, but now I admire you for everything you do have. Strength, patience, grace. You didn't need to prove your worth with numbers. You showed it with love. Thank you for teaching me what real wealth looks like. Thank you for never turning your back on me, even when I deserved it. Love, Chloe." Asterisk. My eyes blurred as I read. I'd never needed an apology, but somehow this felt like a closing chapter, a full circle. I looked up and saw her watching me with tears in her own eyes. For the first time, there was no pride between us, no pretense, just love, raw, earned, and true. Later that night, after dinner, Chloe pulled out her phone. "I have something else to show you." you, she said, her tone trembling slightly. She turned the screen toward me. It was a photo, a logo, the Grace Project. Underneath, a tagline read, helping women rebuild after financial mistakes. I started it last month, she said softly. Workshops, counseling, small support groups. It's not big yet, but it's growing. I want women like me to have a second chance before they lose everything like I almost did. My heart swelled. You're helping others find the strength you found. She nodded, smiling through tears. I guess I'm finally becoming the woman you always were. When I drove home that night, I couldn't stop smiling. Not because of the note, not because of the dinner, but because I'd watched something rare, genuine transformation. Chloe had learned the hardest truth of all, that humility doesn't make you small, it makes you free. Weeks later, she asked me to speak at one of her events. Me, the woman she once called poor. I stood before a room full of women, all carrying their own shame, their own mistakes. I looked at their faces, hopeful, fearful, waiting, and I told them my truth. I was once judged for my simplicity, I began. But I learned that peace doesn't come from what you buy, it comes from what you let go of. The room was silent. I could see tears glistening in more than one pair of eyes. Then I added softly, sometimes being underestimated is a gift. Because while people doubt you, you quietly build a life they could never imagine. When I finished, Chloe came up and hugged me in front of everyone. And in that moment, it wasn't a mother-in-law embracing her daughter-in-law. It was one woman embracing another, equal, honest, redeemed. That night, she walked me to my car. The air was cool, the stars bright. Mom, she whispered, do you remember the first time I came into your house? I chuckled. How could I forget? I looked around and thought you were beneath me, she said. But now I realized you were standing on ground I hadn't even reached yet. I smiled softly. Growth doesn't always look graceful, Chloe. Sometimes it's messy, but you made it through. She took my hands and said quietly, I couldn't have done it without you. I squeezed her fingers gently. Maybe. But remember, I never changed you. Life did. You just needed to stop running long enough to listen. As I drove away that night, my heart felt full. All the pain, the judgment, the silence, it had all led here, to this moment of peace. Because sometimes, justice isn't revenge. It's watching those who mocked you finally find the truth you already knew. And I realized I didn't need her to see my bank account to prove my worth. I just needed her to see me. That was the real victory. Not the millions in the bank, but the richness of forgiveness, the quiet power of character. And as I pulled into my driveway, I whispered to the night, respect isn't earned by money, but by heart. Would you have forgiven her if it were you? Tell me in the comments.